Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon if you are in Bolivia. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Benta Kliko. I'm just going to say a few words about what she's going to talk about. The Chiquitania is a globally unique yet highly threatened plant ecoregion, which is disappearing at an alarming rate through land use changes. The Royal Botanic Gardens in Kew, together with Bolivian partners, is documenting and assessing areas of the Chiquitania for unique plant species and habitat types. And the results of these investigations are available to decision makers locally as well as internationally. Dr. Benta Kliko is a senior research leader at Kew Gardens, which she joined in 2008. After 7 years as a research botanist at the Natural History Museum in London. Benta began academic life in Denmark, wanting to be a zoologist, but moved into botany because the University of Aarhus, which I hope I'm pronouncing right, had a very strong tropical botany research program that she became involved with. She has 35 years of plant research and conservation projects in Latin America under her belt. And for the last 14 years, her conservation work has been focused on Bolivia. And we are delighted that she's sharing her knowledge and expertise with us today. So, Benta, it's all over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the very nice introduction, Kate, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak in the Anglo-Bolivian Society. I'm really honored to have this invitation and this opportunity to share for Kew Gardens research interest and projects and partnerships with Bolivia in this forum. I just find, before Christmas, you hosted the talk of Roberto Navia, and I find it an honor to have to follow in his footsteps. He is a very well-known Bolivian journalist who works in the Chiquitania, for example. And I think it's going to be difficult for me to follow in his footsteps. I'll do my best. And so what I will do, not only jump straight into our current work, but I'll give a little bit of a history of how Kew Gardens has been involved with in Bolivia for the past about 20 years. So here is I'll try and share my presentation here. Right, so if I share can I share my screen now? Share screen. I said host disabled participant screen sharing.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah,
perfect.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So if I now share this one, is that okay?
Yep.
Can you see that? Great. Right. So yes, I'm going to, as I said, talk about Bolivia and how Kew Gardens has been involved with projects in Bolivia for about the past 20 years. And first, most of you probably know what where Bolivia is situated in the sort of central part of South America, in the western part, both having a big share of the Andes, but also the lowlands, which border Brazil, Paraguay, and Chile, and Argentina for that sake. So, and there are many vegetation types. So Bolivia has a mosaic of habitats, and it's mega diverse. For example, in the first catalog of plant species recorded from Bolivia, there were 15,345 species recorded, which makes Bolivia one of the world's mega diverse countries in terms of plant diversity. So partnerships with Kew from 2006, actually Kew has been partnering on projects in Bolivia since year 2000, but with a researcher called John Wood, who is both an honorary research associate at the University of Oxford, but now also an honorary research associate at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. So we have participated, for example, in the catalogue of plants of Bolivia, which is the one up here on the left. And here about 11 Kew staff members participated in the development of this first catalogue of plants. So there were 200 contributors to the catalogue. So 11 of those were from Kew Gardens, and that's the one that where it resulted in a record of more than 15,000 species native species known to Bolivia. In the meantime, Kew has been involved in a project up in the, I don't know, can you see my pointer, or maybe, can you see this?
No. We cannot see your pointer.
You can't see my pointer, okay. So I'll refrain from using, but I'll just try and see if I can get a laser pointer. So you can see this one?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so first Kew partnered, and all the projects I'm talking about, we have partnered mainly with the Natural History Museum in Santa Cruz, which is a department under the University of the Autonomous University of René Moreno in Santa Cruz. And we partnered on a project in the Comarapa Valley. And this is one of the these are some of the outputs from that project I'll talk about a bit later. So the Comarapa Valley is situated in the mid elevation of about 2,000 meters in the Andes, on the western side of the Santa Cruz department. And the valley looks like, it's like this. That's Comarapa, the town. And this is the long valley here where we were undertaking conservation assessment. So here the valley has cactus, shrub, dry forest, and humid vegetation. And it was this place where, for the Bolivian cactus garden. And in connection with that, it was really interesting to understand what type of vegetation were there, to understand that, how we could help conserve in situ the particular area, the cacti growing in the valley, and also build capacity. So we did inventories and both qualitative and quantitative studies, used satellite imagery, and we did some ground truthing fieldwork as well, jointly with the staff from the Natural History Museum in Santa Cruz. And our results were, so these were sort of the results that we had from that study. We mapped 8 vegetation types, and we recorded 360 species, of which 7% of those species are endemic to Bolivia. And the major families, not surprisingly, were cacti and the legumes, and the daisies, and also the Anacardiaceae. And then we have described some new species. And all this information were made available, in species checklist, maps that you saw before, and a report to the Comarapa department, the municipality of Comarapa. And there was a new protected area established, and it also supported the botanical garden. We made posters and trained botanists, and we contributed to the book right here that was published not too long time ago, actually. Next, we talked to the museum in Santa Cruz with staff and said, if we're going to keep working in Bolivia, where would be a place that we could start work, where there's a lot of need for work. So we talked about the Amazon. So we looked at the Amazon, and one of the reasons for that is, if we look at this map, probably well known to some of you, that looking up at the Amazon at the Pando department in Bolivia, and we looked at the Brazilian side of the Amazon in 1984, it looked nicely forested. Looking at in 2016, the Bolivian side is still nicely forested, while in Brazil, in the states of Acre and Rondônia, there's hardly any forest left. It's mainly been converted to agriculture or cattle ranching. So there is quite a race to catalogue the plants and to understand the biodiversity in the area. And for that reason, we started our expeditions, and we worked with 5 different communities together with the local NGO based in Cobija called Herencia, and still with the Natural History Museum in Santa Cruz, and funded by the Darwin Initiative. We work with the communities that Herencia already had good connections, and they all had pieces of intact forest that we could work in and to establish some inventories. In this case, we used what was called permanent plot inventories, which are good at long-term monitoring of differences, because this time we were both looking at plant diversity, but also at carbon. We also calculated the carbon, because one of the aims of this project was to calculate the carbon in the Bolivian Amazon in case Bolivia decide at some stage to use that carbon calculation for leveraging with the World Bank, for example. So we established plots, and we also built capacity, and we found out how much plant diversity there was. We established plots with 4 of the communities, and we worked with the children, because Herencia has established what's called the children's forest, which is a really, really, really interesting concept that we enjoyed very much, where the children of these communities have been set aside forest that's their own. And I just think this is the most fantastic way to bring up the children to have responsibility for the forest. And so we work in the communities where there were children's forests. We worked with the children, took them into the forest and worked with them there. And we also had two local undergraduate students who did their thesis of the project, from Cobija. We had a master's student from Kew who also did their project with us there. And this work has been published in different sort of international networks of plot studies. And this is quite technical, but this is what really has made us help understand how diversity and in Latin America is distributed, and how the carbon is distributed, and it has helped a lot to understand how climate change, how climate change happens across the Amazon as well. And so we've been part of some very big international publications on that work. For example, one called Long-Term Sensitivity to Earth Tropical Forests. So these are really impactful publications at an international level. So all participants have been part of that. But in the same study, we also established agroforestry plots using legume trees called Inga, and we produced a manual for these agroforestry plots, and we produced a book on the potentially useful non-timbered forest products in the area. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into any detail about that today, but I'm happy to take questions later if you have any. So now I'm getting into the third era of study in Bolivia, because what we finished in the Amazon, Kew has had work with Plant Life International on globally important plant areas. And the ones in green, the countries in green, are areas where Plant Life had worked with these countries to establish areas that are important for plants. And these are in line with the areas, it's a concept that is in line with the same concept called areas important for birds. So the important bird areas have been really, really successful in driving conservation in areas that are of global importance for birds. And so Plant Life had established at the beginning of the 2000s, established a similar concepts with criteria for what areas that are important for plants globally. So the ones in green are the ones that Plant Life had established. The ones in brown are the ones we started in 2015 when Kew joined with tropical important plant areas. where we modified the criteria to take into account that in tropical countries, there's a much higher weight on for example, socioeconomically useful plants than there is in temperate countries. So we had to take into account, to make the most of this, take into account some areas that are important for socioeconomically important plants. In Bolivia, that could, for example, be the Amazon, where the Brazil nut trees are super important for livelihoods in the Amazon. And if you were to establish important plant areas in that part of the Amazon, you would definitely take into account Brazil nuts as some of the very important. They would be important for Bolivia because of these socioeconomically important plants. So I'm going to show you this, which is very, very complicated. The only thing you need to understand is that the criteria we use is the number of threatened plants and endemic plants, and the botanical richness, how big is the diversity, how many different species do we have in a particular area, and are there any threatened habitats as well? So are there habitats and threatened species, and how many species are there? And then we have species-rich habitats, we have range-restricted species, meaning endemic species or species that have very, very short, small ranges that only occur in the very few localities, for example, and also these wild harvested socioeconomically useful plants. So I'm not going to go into much detail, but there's a whole set of criteria and methodology for how to assess the sites to become an important plant area. So we started off with in the Bolivian Congress, Botanical Congress in 2015, we hosted a workshop in Sucre, and where we invited people to come and look at maps and identify where they thought in Bolivia that would be really important for plants. And similarly, we held a workshop at Kew Gardens where we had all the people who work at Kew Gardens, mainly all the people who participated in contributed to the Bolivian catalog. We had all these people come along, and we also looked at maps, and we were discussing where we thought sort of from intuitively would be the most important areas for plants in Bolivia. And similarly, the thing is we held meetings, and we were trying from then on we were applying for funding. But it took very long time to get funding or started. But we had a little bit of funding back actually. So in 2017, we had another workshop in Bolivia where we had invited all people from all the main botanical centers in Bolivia, from Cochabamba, from Sucre, from La Paz, Santa Cruz, to Santa Cruz for a 3-day workshop, again to look at where do we think would be the most important areas for plants. So in the end, having looked at all of this and taken into account the little funding we had, we decided on the Chiquitania as a sort of first area where we would start working, because there's a mosaic of habitats, and we recorded between 3,500 and 5,000 species. There's a very high degree of endemism, and there's a really big threat from land use change, as you heard Kate say in the introduction. And John Wood, who was an honorary research associate both at Kew and the University of Oxford, he had worked extensively in the Cerrado vegetation in recording species and documenting species in that vegetation with the local collaborators. So this map, for those of you who don't know the extent of the Chiquitania, this is the extent that sort of most of it is in Bolivia, and there's a branch that borders into Brazil. If I continue, yes. So how we started out and said we have about as I said, we have about between 3,500 and 5,000 species. But what we found is we had a target list of 240 species, and they were endemic to the Chiquitania. They could be the criterion for them to enter our list were that they were endemic to the Chiquitania, and it could be in Brazil or in Bolivia or both. So, but that was what they had to be to enter our study. Then we set off and we undertook several sites, based on all our occurrence data that we had recorded from what's the global facility for biodiversity studies. We downloaded all the material, all the occurrence data for plants, and we also harvested everything we could from Kew Gardens and from local herbaria. So here's Mayra Martinez, and we also had Danielle Villarroel, and I think Danielle is here, and they basically flew around to Argentina and to Paraguay and up into La Paz to the local herbaria to record all the species data, from the localities and collection data that had been recorded for these species that were of special importance. So we had several expeditions round in the Chiquitania to these areas that we had pinpointed based on the density of the diversity of these species. And we also created a threat map. So first we looked at deforestation. So you can see that the red, the very red, is what was deforested until 2000. If you try and look at the Brazilian side of the Chiquitania, there's hardly anything left. It's all been converted. So the green is until the orange, sorry, is until 2005, and until 2010 is the additional onto the yellow, and the red is then the last part of up until 2015, and it's progressing. This map could be, it'll be even less if we updated the map to 2020. But you can see it's disappearing at a rapid rate, and we looked at what the threats to the Chiquitania mainly are. So it's mainly been deforestation. This is the Santa Cruz area. That's mainly deforestation, and it's been land clearance, mainly for converted to agriculture and roads. These are the protected areas, and this is one of the sort of really positive things about the Department of Santa Cruz, that there are a lot of protected areas already that are not based on plants, but at least there are protected areas, and they have some legislation behind them, which is great, and some of them are indigenous areas like the Amni San Matias here, for example, which is a very big area. And there's the Noel Kemp National Park up here, which is also a big area. So there is, that's a very, very good thing about Bolivia, that there's a lot of protected areas already. Right, so we got back to, finally we got some funding, and this time we got funding from the Darwin Institute for a 3-year project, and we launched the project back in 2019, just before COVID. So we had a really nice launch event in August of 2019, where FAN and the Natural History Museum in Santa Cruz hosted a stakeholder event for all, everybody interested in the local people interested in the Chiquitania. So there were about 50 people interested, and we had NGOs, local companies, and the local government, and protected representatives for protected areas. And yeah, it was that was a really nice launch event. And since then, we've basically been working really hard. So the objectives for this project is that we've had to achieve a conservation prioritization in the Chiquitania dry forest, which is globally unique, and to improve the livelihoods of the 6, what we call model Chiquitano communities. So these are communities where we're working particularly with them to diversify their livelihoods. And we want to engage, of course, the stakeholders, including the agricultural producers. And we also wanted to equip the decision makers to designate these globally important plant areas. So we work with the local communities. We work with are all based out in the sort of in the southeast of the Santa Cruz department, near around Roboré and San Juan. And here we have Chiquitania, IPAs, Ramada, and Sanferino, Yoboró, and Entre Rios. These are the 6 communities that we are working with for the moment. Sorry, and we have chosen 3 different species that we are working to harvest sustainably. So one is the Pesue, the other is the Chiquitano almond, and the other is Copaibo. Because there's been a tradition for producing and selling products from some of these species, but it's not sustainably harvested, and it's in very small quantities. So, for example, the Copaibo, it's been harvested in a very, very destructive way by, this species produces resin that is harvested, but it's been harvested by basically taking away chunks of the stem, meaning that the tree will die from this destructive harvesting. So we're helping the communities to harvest sustainably and to still have a really good income from this. So the Chiquitano almond is an almond that is really becoming super popular, also as an export item, and it basically it tastes very much like an almond, but it only grows in South America. And the Copaibo oil, we're using a little tube to insert that doesn't damage the trunk, and we still produce this Copaibo oil that's really attractive and sells for high prices. And the Pesue oil also is attractive and used as a medicine. So here we're building capacity, and we're building techniques with the communities. And here some of the equipment for harvesting the nuts from the almonds from the Chiquitano almond. Here it looks quite damaging, but this is a way of inserting the tube that is non-damaging into the tree to harvest the resin from the Copaibo. And we have also established value chains with sustainable value chains, and we now have 5 associations of producers who work directly with buyers of these products. And so we've helped them help them in how to set up these associations legally, how to look at benefit sharing, and how to promote their products, and all the things you need in order to be a successful producer and seller of products. So that's the sort of the working with livelihoods. On the TPAS assessment side, we've databased. We've had a whole host of 8 volunteers in Kew who came and helped us digitize 16,000 herbarium collections. That may not mean a lot if you're not used to working in herbaria, but that is a lot of work. And so we now have all that data available from the digitization of label data and imaging of these specimens. And we have produced georeferencing, and we have produced 250 IUCN extinction risk assessments. They're the global extinction risk assessment that you see on the global red list if you go to the IUCN portal. So we produced 250 of those, and we have trained 49 people, both in Kew and in Bolivia, in IUCN extinction risk assessment and in how to assess these important plant areas. So, and we've had 5 field expeditions as well. So we've also, in the course of basically since 2016 to 2021, we have identified and documented a network of 18 sites in the Chiquitania that have been accepted by the regional Bolivian autonomous Santa Cruz government. And we have also had student projects, 9 student projects, either licenciado projects in Bolivia and BSc projects in the UK, MSCs in Bolivia and MSCs in the UK. So these are the extinction risk assessment. We've described new species, which is one of the new species we've described. There have been more to come. Right, and this is just to tell you how the species were described. But I think there's more important things to be getting on with. In the course of the project as well, we helped publish a book of the Libro Rojo, also the red list of the threatened plants of the lowlands of Bolivia. This was in manuscript, but there was, before our project, there was no funding to publish the book. So we found the funding, and then we managed to help publish this book, which was launched actually just before COVID in Santa Cruz in connection with British Week in March 2020. So nearly 2 years ago, it was that we launched the book. The British ambassador and the then Bolivian minister for the environment, and the authors, the publisher, FAN, and Kew, we were all there as giving speeches about, and at this official launch. And the book, the fantastic news is that this book has become the known authority for the Ministry of the Environment in Bolivia, for the official red data book for Bolivia. Because there's a similar book for the Andes, but this one is that's the one for for Bolivia. Next is the book itself, and it can be downloaded from the website at Fundación Amigos de la Naturaleza, and as a PDF. Right. So these are all the different occurrence data that when we map the species, these are the sites, or sort of the potential sites. On the right are all the potential sites that we identified, and initially, and then we did all our field work, and in the end, we came up with the sites in brown, which are the accepted sites where we have really good descriptions that are all with images and that are mapped and available with like map layers available for the government to use, and these have been accepted by the Department of the Autonomous Department in Santa Cruz, alongside these Ramsar sites, which are the sites that are based on wetlands and the sites that are based on birds, the important bird areas. So I don't know if you can see, but some of our sites, they overlap with protected areas, but some actually highlight areas that don't have any protection, so didn't have any protection. But they were very much highlighted to the government in the master plan exercise they undertook last year. So for example, in the center of Santa Cruz, there are of the department, you see there's no overlap with anything else, that the orange dots are on their own. So they were very much highlighted to the Department of Santa Cruz as something to be aware of, and come up for protection. Right. So we also work, because of this emphasis on useful species. We identified about 2,800 useful species that are being used in the Chiquitania, and we then highlighted the 50 most useful species in the Chiquitania, and we undertook extinction risk assessments of those as well. And then we looked at them at number by use, and looked at them by vernacular name, because often you have some species that have a scientific name that if you have the common name or the vernacular name, they would have the same name. So we had to sort of filter out and tease out which were the scientific names and which were the vernacular names. But in the end, we found that there were 23 plant families represented, and 25 of the most useful ones are the ones belonging to the legume family and the palm family. And that, to a botanist, that's not a surprise. That's the way it often is, that the legumes and the palms, they often provide, in tropical countries, often provide the most useful plant species. And the main uses are construction, medicine, and fuel wood. So we downloaded from this global facility for plant information, we downloaded all the occurrence data again, and we mapped that, and then we modeled. We have Daniel Villarruel, who's a whiz on modeling facilities, which is great. So he modeled 500 of the useful species, 580 of those useful species, which had 1,200 of those useful species where we had enough data that we could model the distribution and model the diversity of useful species. So there we got some centers. You can see on the left, you can see the ones that are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're the centers we identified as high as the most green are the centers of useful species. And again, the ones on the right is just how that overlaps with the important plant areas. Right, sorry, I'm just here. Right, so I'm jumping too much in this. I'll go back to this because I need to say that spatially, all these, about 80%, that was a really interesting result of our study, was that 80% of those useful species are already protected in protected areas. But 92% of those species are found in these 18, in this network of globally important plant areas. So actually, if we establish and maintain the protected areas for the important plant areas as protected sites, then we would protect about 92% of the useful species in Bolivia. And then that's a really interesting result for a government to know that, because useful species are often both crop relatives. For example, Bolivia is the home of peanuts. So this would be, there will be the peanuts that we use, but there will also be peanut species that are much less known and maybe not used, but may contain some interesting properties, or that would help combat climate change, for example. And by protecting those in these sites, we would make sure that we had, we could go back and look at these relatives to maybe breed into the commercial peanuts. We could breed them in properties for climate change, for example. And similarly for many other species. Just peanuts is it's a good example because Bolivia is a center of diversity for natural, native peanuts. Right. So we've also got, we also had under our belt, we have 6 one-year undergraduate studies, and they have produced fantastic work. All the 6 girls, actually they've all been girls. They've all produced fantastic projects, and tomorrow is the 4th that she's defending her thesis, and 3 have already defended their thesis, and we only have 2 to go, and then all will have defended their thesis. And 2 have already published papers in Bolivian journals on their studies. that are related to, to the project. So one is, for example, the spatial distribution of the Chiquitania almond, and the other is the spatial distribution of the Copaifera, one of the other species that we are working with with the communities in Santa Cruz. So, and that's they've been mainly supervised by Dr. Daniel Villaruel, who's part of the project, and with a group of us, being on their committee as well. We have had, as part of the course, we've also produced or hosted an IUCN assessor course in Santa Cruz, and that was run by two IUCN assessors, Raquel Negrao and Katia Cantero, who are both Kew IUCN assessors, and they both came with me to Bolivia in January 2020 to run a week IUCN assessor course for Bolivian professionals. So, at least we now have we have 15 Bolivians who are, who know the methodology and who can undertake and train other people in IUCN assessment. So they came from throughout Bolivia to Santa Cruz to attend this course. In the meantime, we also run two courses in IUCN and TIPAS methodology for the students of the local universities. And in 2020, we managed to, we just managed to run the course in person in Santa Cruz, while last year we had to go online because of COVID. This year, hopefully, cross fingers, I'll go back to Santa Cruz in March, and we'll run the last course as part of the Darwin project in Santa Cruz in March. And here there have been many students who've been trained, and it's been great to work with young people. So our future plans is that we've had impact in terms of that the methodology has been accepted by the government of Santa Cruz alongside these Ramsar site methodologies and IPAs sites. So this is a globally accepted methodology that's used by the CBD, the Convention of Biological Diversity, and it's an accepted methodology, and it's fantastic that the Santa Cruz department is the first department in Bolivia to have accepted this as in the department. So the assessments are incorporated into the revised master plan for protected areas, and it's helped to limit these 3 new protected areas in Santa Cruz. So our future plan is, because we've had inquiries from other departments, including more of Santa Cruz, which actually, when we calculated, is as big as Japan. So we've been asked to undertake TIPAS assessment throughout the department, and several other departments are interested. So we've been lucky to secure funding for another 3-year project that starts in April this year, where we're going to take all our lessons we have learned in the Chiquitania and upscale the project to work in throughout Bolivia, working with more partners and to undertake these TIPAS assessments or important plant area assessments throughout Bolivia with a wide range of partners. So I'm just left to give all the acknowledgements. So on the left is all the Kew staffs and associates, all the students who've undertaken their projects, and all our volunteers. We had as I say, a host of volunteers, our funders, partner institutions, and I think that's probably it. And if I have missed out anybody, then I'm really, really sorry. And I never meant to. But it's a fantastic project that I'm really pleased that we've been able to do. We've been able to do so much with relatively limited funding. And thank everybody for their participation. And thank you very much for listening. And I think that's probably it. Thank you. Should I now take my slides off?
Yeah, if you can.
I'll stop sharing here.
Sharing, yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Right, thank you very much, Bente. That was really, really illustrative and very interesting, and
You're
excellent,
welcome.
excellent slides.
I hope
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, I hope it's not too technical.
Quite contrary. But anyway, we are now in the Q&A sessions, so I will say that whoever wants to send a question, please use the Q&A session. I'm seeing one. And also use the raise your hand so I can give the mic. But I'm seeing Kate. I don't know if you want to say something first.
Well, I'm dumbfounded. I mean, from a position of almost complete ignorance, I now do feel I know a bit more. And the figure of 15,345 plant species in Chiquitania is just astonishing, isn't it? And presumably it varies from things about that high to, 50-foot high trees.
Yes, exactly. So the 15,000 species is, that's across Bolivia. In the Chiquitania, we have about 3,000 species, but still it's an awful, maybe 3,500. It's an awful lot of plants, compared to the UK. It's no, Bolivia definitely deserves its position as a mega diverse country. And there's still a lot to learn.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that there was one particular tiny thing that was absolutely unique and growing dangerously close to a path.
Oh yes, no, yes, that's right. Actually, we have in the process. Of course, we work with park rangers, and in one of the areas for example, in the Serranía Chiquitos, which is in the very eastern part of Santa Cruz, we work with the park rangers because we identified one of these species that is only known from one locality, and that locality is so close to one of the trails that leads up to one of the most touristed areas in eastern Bolivia. And so we understand, the park rangers now make sure that this area is protected, and it's not, there's no chance that you can walk, and if it's far away from the trail, sort of even divert the trail away from the population, because that a lot of these species are very, very threatened. These tiny populations of species that just need time, on their own. No disturbance. Yeah.
Thanks, Bente. I have here a question for Lucy Daplin, who says, thank you, Bente, for such a wonderful and informative presentation. I would like to know, what are your future plans for work in Bolivia? What are the main challenges?
Wow. So the future work is what I showed, that we would like to take all the experience that we have gathered from working in the Chiquitania, from how to do assessments and how to understand where are the important areas for plants, and then scale that up to the whole of Bolivia. So Bolivia in 3 years, the hope would be in 3 years' time, Bolivia will know where the globally most important areas for plants are. That's that's the vision for the next 3 years. And we have some funding. We still need more funding, but we have some funding to get started with that, starting in April this year. That's it. And the challenges, one is funding, of course. And then, COVID has been a big challenge. I think we've overcome it really, really well. We have, I think that particularly by working so closely with people who've been able to do, I haven't been to Bolivia since I was there in March 2020, for example. But the people, people who are based in Bolivia have been able to go into the field, and we've been able to sort of divvy up the work, doing stuff in the office, and then people have done ground. For example, Mayra Martinez, who's been working for the project, for these past 2 years, he's been doing a lot of field work with local people, and so have the people who work with the local communities. They've been able to, on and off, work with the local communities. When COVID allowed, then they've been not able to do work. So right now, for the moment, cases are going up again in Bolivia. So there's maybe a little bit of a stop again, where it's difficult to work with the communities. But despite that, I think we managed to achieve what we said we would achieve. So yeah, which is great. So COVID is probably is a challenge. What's more challenging? I don't know what more. I'm not sure really, because I find in Bolivia there are so many fantastic organizations and people who would really like to collaborate. So I find that is that's great. That's not really a challenge, but I don't know, Lucy, to be perfectly honest. Give me some time to think about it, and then I don't see that many challenges. Mainly funding is the biggest challenge, I would say.
Thanks, Svante. I have here Annie Koponet, who has raised her hand a long time ago, so I will give her the mic. Annie, you have the mic. You just need to unmute, and you can make your comment or question.
Did I unmute? Am I talking to you?
Yeah. Go ahead,
yes,
please.
you are. Okay. This is a fantastic program you have. I'm enamored of it. I want to know, please, what is your minimum funding budget? And I would like to know, how do you manage with the government's program of destruction to keep them at bay and to protect all these lovely, fantastic plants?
Yes.
That's the point of all this.
Yes, that is a challenge. Yeah, we as a botanic garden, what we can do is provide evidence, and we can provide options, and we can provide that to the local governments. In this case, by working through local partners like Fundación Amigos de la Naturaleza and Museo de Historia Natural in Santa Cruz, they work very closely with the local government, and that way we have managed to have a voice in the local government in their planning process. So I think it's really important to have very strong, have very well founded evidence that you can provide, and that actually helps in the way, in this case, a lot of it overlaps, or some of it overlaps with the protected areas already, but it helps highlight these pockets that the government didn't know about, for example, that need protection. And as a botanic garden, it's not for us really to enter into politics.
Yes, sure.
But we are here to give advice if asked. And similarly, we're happy to help. We're really happy to channel that assistance through our local partners, if you see what I mean. And our budgets are not big, compared to big like NASA projects, and these are not millions and millions of pounds. These are maybe £500 million. We could do, we could establish these types of areas in Bolivia if we had half a million, for example. This is not big. We're not talking big sums of money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Is that a good answer? Is that an answer? Enough of that?
But thank you very much. I am now a little bit more informed, but it was a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Annie. I have here a comment from Marcela Montes. who said, "Thank you very much for this fascinating talk. I hope that the recording will be uploaded onto the ABS website so that link can be shared with others." I will answer that. Yes, Marcela, definitely it's going to be on our website. This and the talk with of Roberto Navias, but in the next couple of days, I plan to upload this magnificent chat and presentation of Bente. So yeah, and we will sharing it with everybody. I have also Michael Elmer, who says, "How much help did you find local names? When working in Bolivia, I often went bird watching. Sometimes I found that in neighboring areas, the same vernacular name was used for somewhat similar, but actually different and distinct species."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly the point. Local names are only useful to a certain extent, because you have a similar name for, and if you look at one local name, for example, now what comes to me first is Ipe in Brazilian, which means tree. So if you look at Ipe or palo, for example, palo blanco in Spanish. If you look at palo blanco and you look at which trees are called palo blanco in Spanish, say in Bolivia and any other country, you'll find that if you look at the scientific names and the actual species, they will cover several different species. So local names are only good to a certain degree, and they're fantastic if you work with local people and you would like to know where different species grow. You have to sort of know the local names to be able to communicate with local people about these species. But if you want to understand the sort of the biological diversity, then you need to be able to separate those and disentangle these local names into scientific names. And I hope that's enough. That's the answer, because he's absolutely right. But with that comment, it's really complicated using local names.
But we're waiting for more questions. If you have, I remind you, if you want to do a question, just raise your hand, or here I have Marcela who's raising her hand, and Winston. I will allow Winston to talk. Winston, go ahead. You can unmute your.
Thank you. Bente, thank you very much for such a fantastic talk. It's really given us a view, a different angle, a different view into the reality of the Chiquitania. This is a trend that we're following. Our interest in the Eastern Lowlands and the Chiquitania is of its importance. My question is the following. How much did you actually rely on local knowledge and beliefs and cosmology and local practices? What did you learn from the local communities that informed the scientific work that you've been doing? And how did that change you?
In terms of the local knowledge, in terms of local
language,
knowledge,
culture, cosmology, beliefs, and practices.
Yeah. So I think we have to separate the two into working with the communities where we have selected 3 different species for to help the diversification of income and for sustainability and sustainable use of these species. And we, of course, we work with the local communities and help and learn from them how they've been using these species, how they understand them, and with them undertook some resource surveys to find out where do these species actually grow in their area. So we work very, very closely with these local communities in in terms of the sort of practical setting up businesses, working sustainably, and getting an income. In terms of the other part, sort of understanding the diversity, from working with useful plants, because as I just said before, working with useful plants is really, really complicated because they are the same, the same species may have many, the same name may cover many different entities in terms of scientific names. So we've relied a lot on the literature, literature of people who have gone before us and who have undertaken ethnobotanical studies in the Chiquitania. For example, Marisol Toledo has done that, and Danielle Villarreal has done other studies. There have been several studies who work with the local communities to understand which species they use and what they use them for. And they have been basically the basis for when I say we have a list of 2,000 useful species, that's mainly based on, or partly based on that literature, that previous literature on how people who have worked with the communities and understood how they use species. It's also based on label data. If we have herbarium label data, it often says on the label, this plant is used for that and that. So we've also gleaned all that information. And actually, I forgot to say that one of our students in the project, one of the licenciado students, she spent her whole project understanding the ethnobotany of Lomerío, the area of Lomerío, where she has worked with about 80 informants to help her tell her which are the local species that are. I think a study, a very early study had been done, but not, it's not. She has done a really thorough study on the useful plants and what people have told her are useful plants, and have recorded that in the area of Lomerío. So yes, so we are basically, so it's a, what can I say? On the one hand, we work with the local communities. On the other hand, we also need to translate that in order to be able to, and do all the analysis. We need to be able to translate it into scientific information. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does indeed. I've just got an added point on the question of traceability, which of course all your work is related with traceability. But if you make reference to the Chiquitano almond and the Copiabo oil.
Sorry, I find it difficult.
You made reference to the Chiquitano almond,
yes.
Copiabo oil and the soy oil as well.
Yeah.
Now, do you apply it? That doesn't come from one location. I mean, is that something that could be commercialized? Is there going to be traceability applied to that? So you know the origin, the specific origin, and what the different qualities are according to location.
So currently, for the Chiquitano almond and for the Copaibo, for the Copaibo oil, for example, and the Pesue oil, what we've done in the community, we've of the 6 communities we work with, we have realized who, we've done resource surveys. So we've found out how many adult trees are there, how many growing trees are there, how many small trees are there, what's the reproductive rate of the species. So we can work with the communities to say, actually, if you're going to do this sustainably, then you're allowed to collect from so many trees per year, or you're allowed to collect so much per year, and you should leave some because they need to reproduce in order to produce more trees. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable anymore. But what we haven't done, in this project, but it's being done maybe in other projects, is look at if on particular types of soils gives a better harvest. If they grow on a particular type of soil that gives a better harvest than if they grow on say on lateritic soil rather than on volcanic soil, or just as an example. That we haven't done, but this is, of course, this is something. We are not the only people who or projects that work with these particular species, but if there are projects in Brazil, for example, who also work with the Chiquitano almond and with the Copaibo, and there's several people who are who work on different aspects. So yes, I don't know exactly who, but I guess there will be people who are also looking at, which different growing on different soil types, which will be the most productive one.
I have just one final point related to what you just said. Is there a potential? I mean, we all know about the Brazilian nut, which is in fact of Amazonia, because it's grown in Bolivia, cultivated in Bolivia, or picked in Bolivia, but exported.
So, I'm really, really sorry, but I have difficulty hearing.
Yeah. The Brazil nut, in fact, which is an Amazon nut, right? Yeah. That's the proper name, because it's known as Brazil nut because it was exported or shipped out to Bolivia. But is there a potential, for example, for the Chiquitano almond and these oils as well, to develop, to become commercial and to benefit the local communities as well?
Very much so. This is what very, very much so. There's a big for the Chiquitano almond. There's a potential to export to California, for example. There's an enormous potential for export. And again, so this is a sort of balancing act. If you want to collect sustainably, you have to, you can export absolutely everything, but then you won't have any more nuts in, say, 10 years. So if they want to work sustainably with the forest, then it has to be, you can only collect so much. And this is one of the, these are some of the things that we're working with them on. And Ruth Delgado, I don't know if Ruth Delgado is in the audience, but if Ruth was here, she could tell you that, for example, for the moment, we're working on promotion material for these cooperatives to show to the buyers what are the products that that can be sold, and what and how can they be used, and where are the markets, and how much can be produced. So yes, these are things that we are working with these 6 communities on.
Thank you very much, Bente. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Winston, for your questions. I have a really nice queue of people who are raising their hand. So I will give first the mic to Marcela Montes, then I will give the mic to Baroness Hooper, who is honoring with her presence today, and then to Alan Shafe. So let's begin with Marcela. Marcela, go ahead. You can speak.
Okay. Hello. It's actually John Montes here. I'm with Marcela.
Fair enough.
And so Marcela's voice hasn't dropped suddenly. Don't worry. So no, thank you very much. We've enjoyed your talk very much indeed. I wanted to ask you a bit about, you mentioned stakeholders who were, I don't know if you said landowners or working in agriculture, and I just wondered, are the, in this, what's the land tenure like in this area? Are they smallholders, or is it land that's used in the community, or are they big landowners? And this project, one of the important things that you've been talking about is putting information out about valuing the products and how to exploit them in a sustainable manner, and what could be marketed. And I just wondered, are there larger landowners who are also involved in this? I don't know who's behind the deforestation. Is it small holders, or is it people who don't actually own the land, or is it large businesses?
It's mainly large businesses. The land conversion or land use change mainly happens by bigger businesses, agricultural businesses that for soy production or for cattle raising. And as Roberto Navia very interestingly mentioned also, a rising number of immigrant population coming, from outside the Santa Cruz department, who are, who practice slash and burn agriculture as another group of, responsible for the main land use change. The Chiquitano communities, they have their own territories, and they have their own land, which is owned as a community, and they work as they work on this land as communities and as small, individual smallholders, and who own these big territories. For example, the Loma Rio area and the Amni San Matias, for example. Yeah.
Right, and so has your initiative, have you been able to have contact with the larger landowners
that's that is maybe what that was actually that's a good question, because Lucy asked me earlier on what the challenges were, and I think that's probably, if I should mention a challenge, that is a challenge. It's what challenge we're still to hold workshops with stakeholders. That's one of the things we're going to do this year. And we want to find ways of holding workshops with the local, with big agricultural organizations, for example. And we know of, we're talking about how to do this, but it is the most challenging thing is to get to contact and come into communication with big landowners. But I'm sure we can do it. It's just it's a matter of finding a way in and do it in a what can I say, in an effective way. So we get to talk to to people, to influential people, and people who are open to to understanding different ways of working. For example, in the project when we worked up in the Amazon, for example, there were big land use, big cattle ranges, for example, who we managed to persuade via for example, to work with agriculture. And I think in this case, something similar, we have to try and work with these people to help them understand that there are different ways of working the land to the way that they've been working it up until now. But Lucy Dublin, who's here today, she can talk much more about that, because that's what she worked on in her PhD. So and I think Lucy is planning to work more in Bolivia, particularly with agriculture, sustainable agriculture.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thanks, John. Now I'm going to give the mic to Baroness Hooper. Baroness, you can speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alberto. And thank you so much for the presentation. It was so clear and informative. And like Kate and others, I feel I've learned a huge amount this evening. So congratulations on all your work.
Well, thank you very much. My pleasure, really.
But I was just wondering, if we were to go to on a visit to Kew Gardens,
yes,
would we find anything to see relating to all your work? And also, is the Eden Project in any way involved in what you're doing there?
The Eden Project is in Cornwall, and it's not involved in what we are doing. Kew is, we have a big, we are 350 scientists at Kew Gardens in our science department, and I think, well, to be perfectly honest, I think what we are doing, we have the specialism here at Kew. We have the expertise in these conservation assessments that and the assessments of areas, and we have specialists who know a lot about the Bolivian flora, jointly with Bolivian botanists who we collaborate with. So the Eden Project is not involved in this at all, and you're super welcome to come to Bolivia, to come to Kew Gardens. There are many plants in the greenhouses that either originate from Bolivia, or that that either have been collected in Bolivia. There are some plants still from when that was possible. There's still, actually not too long time ago, I was in the Princess of Wales Conservatory for a lunchtime walk, and I saw this fantastic plant, and I thought, gosh, that's fantastic. It looks as if it's, it could be from the Andes. and it was collected in Bolivia. But before, when it was possible to collect live plants in Bolivia, now we are not allowed to collect live plants. You know, this is the Convention of Biological Diversity from 1992 tells us, that there has to be a very, very special arrangement with the country if you're allowed to collect live and export live plant material.
Oh, thank you. Well, that in itself is very interesting to know.
Yeah, so Kew Garden adheres to all international, conventions and protocols for how to work with plant material. And in that respect, collecting live material from Bolivia, I have never been, I've never been involved in anything like that. Not in my time.
So we'll have to go to Bolivia in order to see.
Well, you can
specimens.
You can see, yeah, exactly. But there are plants in Kew Gardens that also grow in Bolivia, and as I said, I found a particular plant, and I can, if you come to Kew, then I'll show it to you. That is collected in Bolivia, but prior to 1992.
I see. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Baroness. I'm going now to give the mic to Alan Chafe. So, Alan, the mic is yours.
Can you hear me? Is it working?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the talk. I found it very interesting. It's very useful for me because I'm writing about the history of the British in Bolivia, and Kew Gardens comes into it.
Oh, okay.
In your area of work, did you come across the damage from forest fires? We've had a lot of forest fires, some illegally caused and others naturally, we're told.
Yes.
But did that affect your work? And
it has done.
Yes, it has done. If there were areas where you came across forest fire damage, what is the hope for recovering that land if it doesn't go to agriculture almost immediately? Is it a question of leaving it to regrow naturally, or to go to, for the crops you mentioned, the 3 plants or trees which are legume type and useful? Is it a question of going to plantations?
I think for the native vegetation, we need to leave it. We need to leave it to recover, and we need to leave it to recover for several years. That naturally the cerrado vegetation in Bolivia is affected by fire, but because of these very high temperatures, these previous years, the fire has much more dramatic effect than it has, it's had in the past. And I must say, actually emphasize that we take into account the fire season, the fire drought season in our planning in the project, because the communities are, certain times of the year from July, August onwards until the end of October, they are on, they are fighting the fire. And in 2019, which was a really, really bad year for fire, I was, that was in August, October of 2019, people from the project took me to visit a couple of the communities who had been really, exhausted by fighting the fire, and because it nearly reached their communities. So it's something that the communities really, really struggle with in each year. Some years, of course, more than others, but every year it's like we have to be on the alert from July to October. And I know this year it's been particularly dry as well. So so again, more risk of fires. And in the indigenous people, they don't set the fire. The fire, when you start a fire, then it's because you don't know that, because you don't know that you shouldn't, that fire is something that happens on its own. And if you start a fire, then it often just takes, it just gets out of control. And it's a mechanism slash and burn. It's a sort of tradition that you use in slash and burn agriculture when you burn an area, and then it becomes, you get the fertility from the nutrients that are left in the area. But it's not, it's not something that's informed. It's by people who are totally ill-informed, who undertakes that type of agriculture, particularly in these super dry areas.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Now, I have here a question written by Erwin that is in line of what Winston has been talking with you earlier.
Yeah.
He says, thanks, Bente, for such a great talk and fantastic research results. Do you consider that another kind of your projects could work in the development of sustainable value chains of natural products in the future, like the Chiquitano almond or sustainable wood, to strengthen Chiquitania forest protection?
Sorry, could you repeat the last bit?
Yes, it says, do you consider that another kind of your projects could work in the development of sustainable value chains of natural products in the future, like the Chiquitano almond or sustainable wood, for strengthened Chiquitania forest protection?
Very much so. Actually, very much so. We would love, we've started this area of work, working with, particularly with the Fundación Amigos de la Naturaleza in the sustainable use and value chains of 3 products. And I think we've given our results, it's something we can very easily replicate, and we would like to replicate in other communities. We have these 6, we have the good results from the 6 communities, but this doesn't mean that we would like to stop there. And it would be fantastic if we had funding, and it would be fantastic to continue this work and to scale it up again to, and include more communities where these, where the trees were growing, or to find other products that, that would be useful and that could be brought to market. So again, it's a matter of funding.
Well, I think we have, if anybody else would you like to raise a question, please go ahead, using the Q&A or raise your hand. Let's wait if somebody else wants to participate. Okay, well, Bente, thank you very much. It was really, really interesting conversation. I really appreciate all what I have learned today. It has been quite a lot, so thank you. It was really good. And I will give now the space to Kate so she can close this magnificent webinar. Thank you.
Well, Bente, it's been enormously interesting, really, really interesting. I'm so grateful to you for agreeing to talk, because I mean, there you are, probably in your office still, and it's 8:30, and it's a lot, but it's been extremely kind of you, and I really would like to thank you very much indeed.
Well, the pleasure is mine, really. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to, to share our work with the Anglo-Bolivian Society, and we hope to we'll be in contact, and yes, we're very, very happy to keep working in Bolivia. Hopefully there's a lot more to be done.
Well, thank you very much again.
Thank you very much for everybody who came today.
Thanks, Bente, and thank you everybody who attends the webinar today, and well, until the next time.